Support for Cinema Classics comes from Film Columbus, enriching our community to make Columbus a destination for film education, exhibition, and production. Learn more at filmcolumbus.com. Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows every Thursday at 8:01 p.m. and full shows online at WCBE.org. I'm Johnny DiLoretto.
I'm John DeSando.
We're sort of a little... This is Cinema Classics, but I always forget that.
Yeah.
I feel like we've said it 13 times.
I know.
The show starts.
Sometimes I have to paste it back in.
Yeah.
From
Do you?
the ad.
Do you?
Yes.
Cut it back in there?
Yeah.
I think they know by the time, you know.
Yes.
This is Cinema Classics. What brought this up, this family thing?
Well, I have been thinking for a long time about how many films are relying these days, the last few years, on the search for family or to bring family back. One of the things that struck me that Logan, for instance,
yeah,
you know, it really was basically father-daughter.
And grandfather.
And grandfather, right. And I was thinking, then I began looking at some of those superhero films. And so much of it, and we know even back to Star Wars, of course, how important family was.
Yeah, you know, that's a really interesting thing. I would not have thought about that. I know that there are, you know, that's a motif sometimes. That,
yeah.
Like in Logan, I was quite aware of the fact that there was this family dynamic going on. But it's really interesting when you start thinking about how it plays out across so many movies.
Yes.
Either overtly, like in recently 20th Century Women.
Yes.
That family
nice.
dynamic was
yes.
interesting. Or when it's absent, like in Logan.
Yes.
There is no family, and so they forge one themselves, you know?
Yes.
And, you know, I started thinking about that when we were talking about this topic. For instance, one of the great family movies is The Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, it's right.
Right?
Yeah. Completely dysfunctional.
Completely dysfunctional, but also beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
In its own way. And then I started thinking about that as a Wes Anderson movie, and then I thought about Rushmore, which
Good.
also is a family movie in as much as the family is absent.
Yes.
And he's trying to cobble together one, you know, with his dad and the Bill Murray character and his object of affection, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And don't you think, as you're suggesting, it's all trying, in many cases, it's pulling it back together, the family. Now, however, there can be family trips like Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah, right.
They're still, I mean, the ones I love, of course, are dysfunctional.
Well, yeah, why would we be interested in a family that's not dysfunctional, right?
Well,
if dramatic, if drama requires conflict,
yes,
then there has to be some dysfunction.
And isn't it interesting how in the 50s and 60s we had so many television shows about functional families?
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
And so now, is this a reflection right there?
Yeah. Do you think that having those perfectly sort of, you know, functional families crammed down our throats for so long that it made us dysfunctional in some way, or it exacerbated our dysfunctions because you know, those little anomalies became more pronounced?
Oh yeah. I think too, when we began to distance ourselves from the cohesion of World War II and the good times that came afterwards that I lived through, that perhaps it was just a natural function of the way we as human animals work, is that we just aren't satisfied with things that are good and normal, and it begins and the whole movement toward the self.
Right. That is the key.
Yeah.
That's the key influencer on the structure of the family today. You know, I think about my family back in Steubenville, how, you know, when I was a kid in the 70s, how big it was, you know. And then as people get, you know, in this small steel town, become more ambitious, and they go to school, and then they move away, and they have their own families, suddenly that whole thing is splintered and starts to break apart.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even to the point where now, even though some family members remain within the relative geographical region, you very rarely see them anymore.
It's so true. Now, a couple of things that are happening now that spurred me on to want to enjoy this topic with you. 3 Identical Strangers.
Yeah.
Is about a family that for 20 years was completely separated.
Right, these 3 siblings.
Yes, and they come back together again.
Triplets.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work out well. However, 2 other films I think, well, one has a functioning family, The Incredibles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that one, which is enjoyable, is really about a cohesive family.
Right.
But
there's some tension there because
there is, yes, yeah.
Some Mr. Mom like.
Yeah, right. But basically, they're loving. Now, what about Mamma Mia? Now, I know you would never go see Mamma Mia.
No, that's not true. I wouldn't never go see it. I just have not seen it.
I'm thinking that in there, it is both functional and non-functional. You know, you've got three fathers. We don't know who the father of the girl is.
Yeah.
But you have this strong pull to opening up the old restaurant of Mom Meryl Streep, Donna, and opening it up anew by her daughter, and that there is a feeling to me that's it's a kind of a mashup of even the themes we've been talking about. The family is just completely disorganized, completely competitive, but yet maybe like the Tenenbaums,
Yeah.
they really are cohesive
Right.
in their own way, and that's really the film they end up.
Yeah. And there's so many different iterations of the family in movies. Like, as you were talking about that family, I started thinking about the family in Moonstruck.
Oh,
You know,
great! Yeah.
with Cher.
Oh, you are,
Olympic
because of
Dukakis
Cher.
and Vincent Gardenia. It's so
Yes.
and how the people come in and out of the house, and with each character they bring a different sort of vibe or different problem. You know, and then there's that central romantic tension between, of course, Cher and Nicolas Cage, sort of
Great.
mixing it all up.
Yes.
You know.
And then there's Cher and in Mamma Mia.
Oh, Cher is in Mamma Mia.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Really?
She essentially plays herself. She's
Wow.
outrageous, and she has her romantic connection is with Andy. I'm blowing it. Italian. Oh, yeah.
I know you mean Andy Garcia.
Thank you. Yeah. So the connection.
Spanish.
Spanish. Thank you. Andy Garcia and Cher. Anyway, think about these two as we wind down, and I'm so happy that we have this topic because we're leaving a great deal unsaid. But let me talk about two that have come out recently. One last year, maybe, A Quiet Place.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And then Leave No Trace.
Right, where the family is reduced to two people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going back to our Logan kind of.
And that, you know, you're right. And also, that harkens back to just a couple of years ago, Captain Fantastic with Viggo Mortensen.
Good. I forgot all about it.
Great,
Yeah, what a
sort of
great
family movie.
Survivalist business.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, you know what? We could have just sat here and talked about title after title after title. But it's really interesting. I think the reason why we haven't done that is once you start talking about this as a concept, you see that it's everywhere.
Yes.
It's almost in every film. Even in its absence, it starts to resonate, right?
Yes.
If you have a character who's just moving through the narrative laconically, you start to think about the absence of family, the absence of friends and support, right?
Yes.
That reminds me of The Outlaw Josie Wales, which is a family movie. His family is murdered at the beginning.
Yes.
And as he becomes this sort of vicious mythical outlaw, he starts collecting people. So at the end of the movie, they're out west and they're in this cabin and they're living all together in this like crazy, wacky, weird family.
Oh, you're wonderful. I always like to end up our show by telling you what we're not going to talk about.
Yeah, what aren't we going to talk about?
Godfather.
Oh, yeah. So but anyway, it was looming over the whole show because we hadn't even mentioned it. And you ruined it.
Anyway, I think we ought to go back to our how lucky we are, to our own families.
Yeah.
Your two boys,
Mm-hmm.
my 6 children.
Yeah.
I have probably more dysfunction in mine than you do.
I don't know.
But
I do a pretty good job of covering all of it myself.
Since you're significantly younger than I, you have enough time. So good luck with your dysfunctional family.